We've had to do an episode on Adolescence, the new Netflix drama series. Well, it's not actually a series, it's a one-off, but if you've not seen it yet, I would highly recommend going and watching it because it's possibly one of the best things I've ever seen on TV and something that has really actually quite disturbed me as a parent, especially as a mum of a young boy. Now, my son Jacob is not 13 like Jamie was in the show. My son is only 5, but even still, it makes you question everything you're doing as a parent. So I wanted to break it down a little bit because I know that some people have said they didn't understand it and they wanted a more conclusive kind of final episode for the show. But I think we've missed the point of the show if that's what you got from it. So I wanted to unpack it a little bit. So yeah, let's get into it. Welcome back to Unfiltered Parenthood, the show for parents and parents in business, where we talk about everything to do with children. And yeah, let's get into adolescence. I think a lot of people have completely misunderstood what this series was trying to do. So if you watched it and you felt that it was boring and it didn't have a clear conclusion, I'd argue that you weren't really paying attention to the show and what it was trying to do. It's not supposed to be a fast-paced crime thriller that we're all used to. And I think that's probably one of the points of it, that we are so used to things like TikTok where, you edit everything so quickly and there's no room for error anymore with things. If you don't get people hooked straight away on TikTok, they scroll past. We've literally just got used to that fast-paced drama, fast-paced gossip, everything now. We have to have everything straight away. And the show was not like that. It was filmed essentially in one long take. For all 4 episodes were filmed continuously in one take. It is supposed to be a journey so that we can see what is actually going on in kind of real time. And it's not a crime thriller that we're used to where you get a neatly wrapped up ending with the courtroom drama and we see him being carted off and that's it. It's not supposed to be like that. It's a really unsettling, thought-provoking exploration of modern childhood, something that we are not used to. I'm 37 and the children that we have now and what they're growing up in now and what they're exposed to online and at school and in real life is much different to what we had when we were children. We've got things like online radicalization, feeling helpless as a parent and not being able to help, and the more terrifying question of how well do we know our children, what our children are doing, and the nature versus nurture thing. Is it something that we can help as parents? Does it really matter how well we bring up our children? If they've got that kind of mindset to do something like this, overall, does it really matter in terms of how we parent them? Or is it all to do with parenting? Is it something that we can prevent and control? So I want to break it down episode by episode because each episode, the way that I saw it, is a different story. It's a different purpose. And they all work together over the 4 episodes to tell a very dark story. So episode 1, we see 13-year-old Jamie Miller being arrested for the murder of his classmate, Katie Leonard. And right away, the police storm the house, they break the door down, they go in with armed guns, they order everyone on the floor, they go into Jamie's room, they say suspect confirmed, and then we're made to feel even more sorry for Jamie because we realise that he's actually wet himself because he's frightened. And that's when we first have that kind of thing of, this is a child, this is a 13-year-old child that's so scared of these policemen going into his house that he's wet himself, he's had an accident. And that is gut-wrenching in itself, the fact that he's a child. But at that particular moment in the programme, we don't know whether Jamie's done anything. And the way that the programme goes on is that in that episode, we're supposed to feel these things. We're supposed to feel that he hasn't done it. How could he possibly have done it? He's 13. And it's not until the middle of the episode where we really find out what he's actually supposed to have done. We obviously know that Katie's been murdered, but we don't know the extent of the murder. We don't know how she was murdered. Was it that they were arguing and he pushed her and she fell into a car? Was it that kind of murder? It wasn't until the middle of the show that we find out she was repeatedly stabbed in various different parts of her body, very aggressively killed. And that is where the turning point of the story goes, because then we start thinking, oh, okay, something has gone on here. There obviously was quite an aggressive element to this murder. So all the way through pretty much episode 1, we're led to believe it's a horrible mistake and he's a child. He's a very innocent looking child as well. We see his parents, Eddie and Amanda, in shock in the family room that they take them to, and the sister. We see Jamie being put in the cell on his own. He then asks his dad to be his parental guardian while he's going through it. So obviously his dad can be in there while they're discussing everything as well. And then we see the section where they take him off to have his fingerprints done and his DNA tested as well. And he's strip searched, which again is a really hard-hitting moment as a parent, because you're sitting there at the same time that Jamie's dad is sitting there and standing there, and you're thinking, what on earth would I do in that situation if that was my child, where fully grown men are asking to strip search my child? And we basically spend the entire episode thinking there is absolutely no way that this innocent looking little boy could have done this. And it goes around to the Kill a Mockingbird kind of style, miscarriage of justice. That's where we're thinking it's going to go. We want to believe that he's innocent. We want to believe that a 13-year-old cannot do this to another person and another child as well. And then right at the end, pretty much, we see the tape at the same time that Jamie's dad does. And the solicitor, who's in the room as well, does actually try to warn Jamie's dad. So just before the police, I think the policeman says to him, "You're aware of what CCTV is, aren't you, Jamie?" And that's when the solicitor actually steps in and says, "I think we need to take a break here," because clearly he knows that the police have got damning evidence and he needs to consult Jamie and his dad, but Jamie's dad doesn't quite get this. He doesn't understand, and he allows the interview to continue, and that is when the tape is played. And the tape is played in front of Jamie, in front of us, and in front of his dad. And we see Jamie arguing with Katie in a car park, where he then pushes her down onto the floor and very aggressively attacks her. And that is then when we see, in the same moment that Jamie's dad does, that, yeah, okay, he did do this. And not only did he do it, but he did it in a very, very aggressive way than we were led to believe, than this child who has been pleading his innocence and telling his dad that he didn't do it. And it's not the innocent child that we are led to believe that it was. And it's a complete gut punch. It's brutal. It's a heart-stopping moment where our assumptions of this little boy go out the window, essentially. We, like Eddie, his dad, don't want to believe what we're seeing. But yeah, there it was. Jamie clearly did it. No mistake, no misunderstanding. 13-year-old killed a child, essentially. Episode 2 is a slightly different episode, but just as hard-hitting. This episode is not just about Jamie, it's about all children, and it's about the school system. We see various different children. We see Katie's friend, I can't remember her name, who's obviously very upset about Katie's death. She's very angry. We see the policeman's son, Adam, I think his name is. And it's actually the policeman's son that kind of gives us a proper insight from the perspective of a high school student perspective on what is actually happening, because the policeman has gone in there expecting to unlock the case the same as a normal adult go in there and speak to these children, and these children are going to listen because he's a policeman. And the son actually comes up and says, no, this isn't going to happen. The reason you're not getting a response from the people is because you don't understand what's going on here. And this is where we find out that Katie was actually bullying some of the other boys. And this is where we start to see where the undertone of the whole program, which is like misogynistic behavior, comes in, because Jamie was being bullied, so he feels like he needs to start asserting himself a little bit more over people. But this episode makes us question everything about the education system. What are our children actually learning at school? How much do we actually know as parents? Are they preparing our children for life outside of school? Are they keeping them safe? What sort of teachers do we have? I have questions about some of the teachers that were there, especially I think it was the history teacher. Like, he was very dejected. He was late for class. He knew the policemen were coming in to interview the children and he was late. He didn't really seem to be switched on to anything or attuned to anything in the school. And these are people that are teaching our children. And it's not to blame the school system at all, but I've had questions about the school system. Even when I was at school, it wasn't great. And now I think it's just got that much worse. We're essentially sending them off as parents to school because we believe that's the best thing for them, that they're going to learn, they're going to be educated. But we're not. We're putting them in with other children, with other backgrounds, with other beliefs, with other cultures. And we've got all of this technology now, and we put children together for essentially 6 to 8 hours a day, where they are all learning different sort of things. And it's terrifying, actually, that they're essentially going off to school to be indoctrinated into whatever it is that they're being indoctrinated into. And I think sometimes schools need to address, especially in England, we've got the national curriculum, which I've got a lot of questions about. It's a very one-size-fits-all system, and not all children learn the same. Not all children respond the same to different methods of teaching. And I think sometimes we are, as school, just shoving information into children's heads without really addressing things that actually matter to them. And the part with the emojis being discussed was particularly disturbing, because as parents, we are aware that technology is a part of our children's lives, and we can do our best to stay up to date and stay current with what's going on. And we put blocks on games. We say you can't chat to your friends online, you can't chat to random people. When I was younger and the internet was just coming around, it was just a chat room that we had, and that was dangerous enough. But now you can actually talk to people on headsets, you can have conversations with them, and we try our best as parents to prevent that from happening. And we teach our children about online safety and cybersecurity and all of this sort of stuff. And at the end of the day, these are just emojis. They're little pictures, but they apparently mean different things to children now. When I was younger, I think we didn't even have emojis when I was younger, but I wasn't aware that there was a different meaning for a red heart, an orange heart, and a green heart, and a yellow heart. I just pick an emoji and think, I want to send a heart. Most of the time I send a red heart. But if it happens that when I click heart, that it's an orange one, I'll send an orange one, because to me it's just a heart. But that means those colours mean different things. Horse symbols apparently mean drugs, ketamine. I've looked into a lot of different emojis we all know the aubergine emoji, we all know what that stands for. And the little water, squirting water emoji, we all know that's a rude emoji. But I didn't realise that it went that in depth, that you could have this like full-on undertone and conversation around heart-coloured emojis. And then we, as parents, think that, especially when our children are at home, they're safe. But this episode shows us that safety at home is also not what we think it is. Kids are nowadays communicating in ways that we don't understand. And I think even with the best of intentions, we will never understand that technology has actually outpaced us now. And there are entire online subcultures that are full of hidden meanings, and we as parents are in the dark about it. Jamie's mum and dad had no idea what he was consuming online. They had no idea what the emojis meant, the same as most of us. And that's the really frightening part of that episode, is that how much do we actually know about what our kids are doing online and on their devices? It's not just about monitoring screen time. It's about really, truly understanding what they're being exposed to and who they're talking to online and what they're talking about online. This episode specifically isn't really about Jamie. It's about the digital world raising our children when parents aren't looking. Episode 3 is probably the more disturbing episode I found. It's the scene with the psychologist. And this is where we start to really see the real Jamie. So up until now, we've only really seen him as this frightened, scared, young 13-year-old boy. We don't really understand the meaning behind why he did what he did at this stage until he starts talking to the psychologist. That's when we start to realise that Jamie actually isn't as innocent as he has portrayed himself throughout. It's a really powerful episode, because if you miss the meaning behind that episode, you will see how quickly Jamie switches from being this innocent 13-year-old to someone that is trying to assert dominance over a female. He switches very quickly to interrupting her, challenging her, standing over her, making subtle yet very aggressive statements to her. And it's chilling. It's truly one of the most chilling pieces of TV I've ever seen, because we, as the viewer, are watching it in real time as if we were in that room, the same as the psychologist. We're not seeing jump cuts. We're not seeing breaks. We're seeing it in real time as if we were the psychologist. Even she, I think, up until that stage, hadn't seen that side of Jamie. She hadn't seen the real Jamie. We see her going in at the start of the episode. She takes him a sandwich. She takes him a hot chocolate. She's still treating him as this young little boy. And potentially at the beginning of the episode, she probably thought that he was still innocent and he was still mistaken identity, and that something else had gone on and he hadn't really done it, until we start to see what Jamie is actually really, and where this dominance and this control comes into play. We see how frightened that psychologist is and how shocked she is as to how quickly he changes character, essentially. And we are watching in real time how this young boy has internalized this kind of toxic online misogynistic rhetoric, and he's starting to apply it in the real world. He's starting to apply it over that psychologist. She's the female in the room. He's starting to assert his dominance. He's starting to use what he's learned online over this psychologist in real time. And we start to see it creep in. The entitlement from him, the anger from him. And this episode is really crucial because it forces us as the audience to confront a really ugly truth, that radicalization of children can happen in plain sight. Jamie wasn't going anywhere to clubs where he was being radicalized. He wasn't being radicalized in little groups where he was being taken away and radicalized outside of his home or anything. This has happened from the safety of his own home. This has happened at school. That's the only two places that this could have happened. And those two places are supposed to be the safe places. And for me, I have not slept properly since I watched this series. It really upset me as a parent, and it makes me worry about the world that I've brought my son into, and it makes me worry about what I'm doing as a parent and how I can hopefully prevent this and make my son a safe man to be around, not be exposed to these sort of things. This episode with the psychologist was hands down the most unsettling episode for me, because it showed us that Jamie's crime wasn't like an isolated, out of character event. It was who he was becoming as a man. And then the final episode is about trying to regain some normality for the family. So I think this is 13 months. I think it was 13 months later or 7 months later. I can't remember. But Jamie's no longer the focus. Jamie's in a detention centre. He's not been sentenced yet. He's in a detention centre. And we are trying to watch his family move on. We're trying to watch his mum and his dad move on, or try to, but they can't. We see Jamie's dad's van being vandalised and misspelt with the word nonce written on it. This is just a guy trying to go about his daily business, and he gets his work van vandalised, which he can't get off. We then see them going to a hardware store so he can try and get some paint thinner to try and get the paint off. And then he has a very unsettling conversation with another young man that works in the store, who says to him that he's on Jamie's side and he can see why Jamie did it because of what the girl was doing or what she was saying. So we start to see here that actually this behavior that Jamie has picked up isn't isolated to Jamie. This is something that is outreaching into society. We are walking about in society with people that feel this way, and that's frightening. That it could just be your local hardware store with a young lad that also has the potential to feel exactly the same way about women that Jamie did and agreed with what Jamie did. And that's a tipping point for the dad at that point. He buys the paint to cover the word on his van. He walks out of the store. He says nothing to his wife and his daughter. He sees the lads that he believes wrote the word on his van. He goes up and has a go at them and tells them to leave him alone. And then he goes and chucks the paint all over his van. He's having a breakdown at this point because he's had enough of everything that's been said to him. And he himself, you can see how disturbed he is by having that conversation in a shop. He's not disturbed about the fact that someone recognised him as Jamie's dad. He's not concerned about that at all. He's concerned about what that boy in the shop said to him and the fact that he agreed with what Jamie did and why Jamie did it. That's what disturbed him, and that's what made him have this reaction. And we see the family essentially trying to hold it together until they're on the way home. The phone rings in the van, and then it's Jamie wishing his dad a happy birthday. And he says that he's going to plead guilty, and Jamie's dad can't bring himself to talk to him. So his mum and his sister try and talk to him instead.
A few moments later.
But his dad's kind of shut off at this point. His dad's trying to process everything that's been said to him. The fact that he's just lost his little boy. And he knows he's lost his little boy. We then see his mum and dad go upstairs and have a very upsetting conversation about, is there anything that they could have done differently as parents? Why did their daughter turn out the way she has and their son has turned out the way he has when they had the same upbringing, essentially? We see them blaming themselves, which I think is a perfectly natural reaction for parents. When your child does something wrong, you automatically blame yourself. Is there something that we did as parents? What could we have done differently? If we did anything differently, would that have made a difference? We don't know. And then we have the final scene where Eddie goes into Jamie's room and the song that's playing is actually Katie singing. Now, I found this out later. I didn't realise this. But the girl that is singing the track when Eddie is in the room is actually the girl that played Katie singing that song, which makes it even more gut-wrenching. It's a subtle touch to say that she's always there, she's always around, and what she could have become. This young girl had her life taken away from her. And Jamie's dad breaks down and he's crying on the bed. And we see him pull a teddy bear out, Jamie's teddy bear. And we're taken back as parents to when we would tuck our children into bed. We'd give them a teddy bear. We'd kiss their teddy bears. We'd kiss them. We'd hug them and we'd say goodnight. Jamie's dad tucks the teddy bear into bed as if it was Jamie, something he'll never be able to do again. It's not just heartbreaking as a parent to see that and seeing Jamie's dad like that, but it's a gut-wrenching symbol of everything he's lost. It's not just about grief that he's lost his son. We've lost Katie. So there's two children that we lost, but it's about guilt. That Teddy in that moment is Jamie as a little boy, the little boy that his dad still wishes he was. Before all of this, before the crime, before the internet got involved, before his dad started working long days, it's that little boy. And then the final shot is him tucking the bear in, and he apologises to it, kisses its forehead, and he's not just mourning his son, he's not mourning the loss of his son, he's mourning a child that he, as a parent, failed to protect for whatever reason. And he said he should have done better. Not, I'm sorry, son. Not, I love you. Not, this wasn't your fault, but an admission of responsibility as a father. That scene is a dad blaming himself for what his son became, ultimately. And then he walks out. Not a dramatic breakdown, not a big emotional collapse, just a quiet moment of resignation. Because what else can be said? Nothing else can be said. And I think some people wanted a big, conclusive ending to the show because that's what they're taking it as, is a show. A courtroom verdict, a dramatic reveal, a clear takeaway. But Adolescence doesn't do that because that's not what it was supposed to be. It's real life. And when something like this happens, there isn't a big aha moment. There isn't a big reveal where someone comes storming into the courtroom and says, he didn't do it. And there isn't a final perfect resolution. It's just a broken family. 2 children that we've lost, 2 very young children that we've lost. A father drowning in what ifs. Could he have done better? Could we have done better as a society? A mother haunted by everything. A sister left without a brother. She's dealing with her own stuff at school. She says that she's always going to be Jamie's sister. And it doesn't matter where they move to because people are going to find out eventually. So she's dealing with all of this as well. And then we've got Jamie, a very lost 13-year-old child, physically, emotionally, and morally lost. And the ending of Adolescence isn't about Jamie, it's about what's left behind after something like this happens. And the fact that Eddie, the dad, walks out of Jamie's room, putting Jamie's teddy bear on the bed, that tells us everything. There is no moving on from this, just trying to live with it and trying to deal with the aftermath. That's it. And I think a lot of people miss that Adolescence was never about the crime. It was never about what actually happened. It was about the making of the crime. It was about making that criminal. What led Jamie to do that? And sometimes we will never know as a society what led a 13-year-old boy to kill Katie. What was said on the car park? Why were they arguing in the first place? Why did Jamie's friend give him a knife? We don't know. We probably will never know. And even if there was a courtroom scene and we had those answers, it doesn't make the outcome any different. Katie's still dead. A young girl is still dead. Does it really matter? Why? It was about how a young child, a normal child, can be shaped into something terrifying by the society that he's brought up in, how the internet has become an invisible third parent despite our best efforts as parents to keep them safe, how we as parents may never really truly know our children and know what they get up to and who they're talking to. And at the end, when Jamie's dad says that he should have done better, that's the show's message. That is what the message of the show is about. It wasn't about what Jamie did. It was about what wasn't done to stop it and what could have been done potentially to stop it. So I would urge you to go and rewatch it again if you haven't quite understood it, and hopefully this has helped a little bit. As I say, it has really unsettled me as a parent. It's taken me a long time to record this podcast episode because it does really upset me talking about it. And I think as a parent, if you don't get upset by watching it, that is part of the problem. It's made me rethink and re-question a lot of things that I do as a parent, and hopefully I'll be able to correct them and hopefully prevent them. So, yeah. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Sorry it's a bit of a hard-hitting one this time, but that's what the show's about. So, yeah. See you all next week.